billions of dollars and have an ongoing, thriving hotel and real estate business. Are you planning on putting your assets in a blind trust should you become president? With such vast wealth, how difficult will it be for you to disentangle yourself from your business and your money and prioritize America's interests first?
Well, it's an interesting question because I'm very proud of my company. As you too know, I built a very great company, but if I become president, I couldn't care less about my company. It's peanuts. I want to use that same up here, whatever it may be, to make America rich again and to make America great again. I have Ivanka and Eric and Don sitting there. Run the company, kids. Have a good time. I'm going to do it for America. Okay? So I would be willing to do it.
So you'll put your assets in a blind trust?
I would put it in a blind trust. Well, I don't know if it's a blind trust if Ivanka, Don, and Eric run it, but is that a blind trust? I don't know. But I would probably have my children run it with my executives, and I wouldn't ever be involved because I wouldn't care about anything but our country, anything.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Governor Christie, going back to your U.S. attorney days, you have been praised by both parties as certainly a tough law and order guy. So I wonder what you make of recent statistics, sir, that show violent crime has been spiking, sometimes by a double-digit rate in 30 cities across the country. Milwaukee's police chief Ed Flynn says most local law enforcement officials feel abandoned by Washington. Former NYC police chief Ray Kelly says that police are being less proactive because they're being overly scrutinized and second-guessed, and they're afraid of being sued or thrown in jail. What would you do as president to address that?
Well, first off, let's face it. The FBI director, Jim Comey, who's a friend of mine who I worked with as U.S. Attorney in New Jersey, he was the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan, he said it. There's a chill wind blowing through law enforcement in this country, and here's why. The President of the United States and both his attorneys general, they give the benefit of the doubt to the criminal, not to the police officer. That's the truth of the matter. And you see it every time with this president. Every time he's got a chance. Going all the way back to, remember that great beer summit he had after he messed up that time. This is a guy who just believes that law enforcement are the bad guys. Now, I, for 7 years, was the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey. I worked hard with not only federal agents, but with police officers. And here's the problem. Sanctuary cities is part of the problem in this country. That's where crime is happening, in these cities where they don't enforce the immigration law. And this president turns his back. This president doesn't enforce the marijuana laws in this country because he doesn't agree with them. And he allows states to go ahead and do whatever they want on a substance that's illegal. This president allows lawlessness throughout this country. Here's what I would do, Neil. I would appoint an attorney general, and I would have one very brief conversation with that attorney general. I'd say, General, enforce the law against everyone justly, fairly, and aggressively. Make our streets safe again. Make our police officers proud of what they do. But more important than that, let them know how proud we are of them. We do that, this country will be safe and secure again, not only from criminals, but from the terrorists who threaten us as well. I'm the only person on the stage who's done that, and we will get it done as President of the United States.
Thank you, Governor. Governor Kasich, as someone who has to deal with controversial police shootings, all right. You've had to deal with controversial...
Why you wore a red tie.
Exactly. You've had to deal with controversial shootings in your own state. What do you make of Chicago's move recently to sort of retrain police, maybe make them not so quick to use their guns?
Well, I created a task force well over a year ago. And the purpose was to bring law enforcement, community people, clergy, and the person that I named as one of the co-chairmen is a lady by the name of Nina Turner, a former state senator, a liberal Democrat, actually ran against one of my friends, and our head of public safety. And they sat down as a group trying to make sure that we can begin to heal some of these problems that we see between community and police. And they came back with 23 recommendations. One of them is a statewide use of deadly force. And it is now being put into place every place across the state of Ohio. Secondly, a policy on recruiting and hiring, and then more resources for training. But let me also tell you, one of the issues has got to be the integration of both community and police. Community has to understand that that police officer wants to get home at night and not to lose their life. Their family's waiting for them. At the same time, law enforcement understands there are people in the community who not only think that the system doesn't work for them, but works against them. See, in Ohio, we've had some controversial decisions, but the leaders have come forward to realize that protest is fine, but violence is wrong. And it has been a remarkable situation in our state. And as President of the United States, it's all about communication, folks. It's all about getting people to listen to one another's problems. And when you do that, you will be amazed at how much progress you can make and how much healing we can have. Because, folks, at the end of the day, the country needs healed. I've heard a lot of hot rhetoric here tonight, but I got to tell you, as somebody that actually passed a budget that paid down $500 billion of our national debt, you can't do it alone. You got to bring people together. You got to give people hope, and together we can solve these problems that hurt us and heal America. And that is what's so critical for our neighborhoods, our families, our children, and our grandchildren.
Senator Rubio, under current law, the U.S. is on track to issue more new permanent immigrants on green cards over the next 5 years than the entire population of South Carolina. The CBO says your 2013 immigration bill would have increased green card holders by another 10 million over 10 years. Why are you so interested in opening up borders to foreigners when American workers have a hard enough time finding work?
Well, first of all, this is an issue that's been debated now for 30 years. And for 30 years, the issue of immigration has been about someone who's in this country. Maybe they're here illegally, but they're looking for a job. This issue is not about that anymore. First and foremost, this issue has to be now, more than anything else, about keeping America safe. And here's why. There is a radical jihadist group that is manipulating our immigration system, and not just green cards. They're recruiting people to enter this country as doctors and engineers and even fiancés. They understand the vulnerabilities we have on the southern border. They're looking to manipulate the visa waiver countries to get people into the United States. So our number one priority must now become ensuring that ISIS cannot get killers into the United States. So whether it's green cards or any other form of entry into America, when I'm president, if we do not know who you are or why you are coming, you are not going to get into the United States of America.
So your thinking has changed?
The issue is a dramatically different issue than it was 24 months ago. 24 months ago, 36 months ago, you did not have a group of radical crazies named ISIS who were burning people in cages and recruiting people to enter our country legally. They have a sophisticated understanding of our legal immigration system, and we now have an obligation to ensure that they are not able to use that system against us. The entire system of legal immigration must now be re-examined for security first and foremost, with an eye on ISIS, because they're recruiting people to enter this country as engineers, posing as doctors, posing as refugees. We know this for a fact. They've contacted trafficking networks in the Western Hemisphere to get people in through the southern border. And they got a killer in San Bernardino in posing as a fiancé. This issue has to be about stopping ISIS entering the United States. And when I'm president, we will.
Thank you, Senator.
But Maria, radical Islamic terrorism was not invented 24 months ago. 24 months ago, we had al-Qaeda, we had Boko Haram, we had Hamas, we had Hezbollah, we had Iran putting operatives in South America and Central America. It's the reason why I stood with Jeff Sessions and Steve King and led the fight to stop the Gang of Eight amnesty bill, because it was clear then, like it's clear now, that border security is national security.
Thank you, Senator.
But Maria,
It is also the case that Rubio-Schumer amnesty bill, one of the things it did is it expanded Barack Obama's power to let in Syrian refugees. It enabled him, the president, to certify them en masse without mandating meaningful background checks. I think that's a mistake. That's why I've been leading the fight to stop it. And I would note, the Senate just a few weeks ago voted to suspend refugees from Middle Eastern countries. I voted yes to suspend that. Marco voted on the other side. So you don't get to say we need to secure the borders and at the same time try to give Barack Obama more authority to allow Middle Eastern refugees coming in when the head of the FBI tells us they cannot vet them to determine if they are ISIS terrorists.
Maria, let me clear something up here. This is an interesting point when you talk about immigration. Ted Cruz, you used to say you supported doubling the number of green cards. Now you say that you're against it. You used to support a 500% increase in the number of guest workers. Now you say that you're against it. You used to support legalizing people that were here illegally. Now you say you're against it. You used to say that you were in favor of birthright citizenship. Now you say that you are against it. And by the way, it's not just on immigration. You used to support TPA. Now you say you're against it. I saw you on the Senate floor flip your vote on crop insurance because they told you it would help you in Iowa. And last week we all saw you flip your vote on ethanol in Iowa for the same reason. That is not consistent conservatism. That is political calculation. When I'm president, I will work consistently every single day to keep this country safe, not call Edward Snowden, as you did, a great public servant. Edward Snowden is a traitor. And if I am president and we get our hands on him, he is standing trial for treason. And one more point. Every single time that there has been a defense bill in the Senate, 3 people team up to vote against it. Bernie Sanders, Rand Paul, and Ted Cruz. In fact, the only budget you have ever voted for, Ted, in your entire time in the Senate is a budget from Rand Paul that brags about how it cuts defense. Here's the bottom line, and I'll close with this. If I'm president of the United States and Congress tries to cut the military, I will veto that in a millisecond.
I'm going to get a response to that, Neil. There's no way he launches 11 attacks. He had no fewer than 11 attacks there. I appreciate your dumping your Oppo research folder on the debate
No, it's your
stage.
record.
But I will say
Do you think they like each other?
At least half of the things Marco said are flat out false. They're absolutely false. So let's start with immigration. Let's start with immigration and have a little bit of clarity. Marco stood with Chuck Schumer and Barack Obama on amnesty. I stood with Jeff Sessions and Steve King. Marco stood today, standing on this stage. Marco supports legalization and citizenship for 12 million illegals. I opposed and oppose legalization and citizenship. And by the way, the attack he keeps throwing out on the military budget, Marco knows full well I voted for his amendment to increase military spending to $697 billion. What he said, and he said it in the last debate, it's simply not true. And as president, I will rebuild the military and keep this country.
All right, we have to stop. I know you are very passionate about that. Governor Bush, fears have gripped this country, obviously, and you touched on earlier, since the San Bernardino attacks. Since our last debate, the national conversation has changed, according to Facebook data as well. Now, this first graphic shows the issues that were most talked about right before those attacks and now after. The issues of Islam, Homeland Security, and ISIS now loom very large. The FBI says Islamic radicals are using social media to communicate and that it needs better access to communication. Now, the CEO of Apple, Governor Tim Cook, says, unless served with a warrant, private communication is private, period. Do you agree, or would you try to convince him otherwise?
I would try to convince him otherwise, but this last back and forth between 2 backbench senators, it explains why we have the mess in Washington, D.C. We need a president that will fix our immigration laws and stick with it, not bend with the wind. The simple fact is, one of the ways, Maria, to solve the problem you described is narrow the number of people coming by family petitioning to what every other country has, so that we have the best and the brightest that come to our country. We need to control the border. We need to do all of this in a comprehensive way, not just going back and forth and talking about stuff.
You answered this question.
Oh, I'll talk about that too. But you haven't asked me a question in a while, Neil, so I thought I'd get that off my chest, if you don't mind.
Fair enough. So Tim Cook is going to keep it private.
I got that, and the problem today is there's no confidence in Washington, D.C. There needs to be more than just one meeting. There needs to be complete dialogue with the large technology companies. They understand that there's a national security risk. We ought to give them a little bit of a liability relief so that they share data amongst themselves and share data with the federal government. They're not fearful of a lawsuit. We need to make sure that we keep the country safe. This is the first priority. The cybersecurity challenges that we face, this administration has failed us completely. Not just the hacking of OPM, but that is just shameful. 23 million files in the hands of the Chinese. So it's not just the governments, the private sector companies, it's also our own government that needs to raise the level of our game. We should put the NSA in charge of the civilian side of this as well. That expertise needs to spread all across the government, and there needs to be much more cooperation with our private sector. But if Tim Cook is
telling you no, Mr. President.
You got to keep asking. You got to keep asking, because this is a hugely important issue. If you can encrypt messages, ISIS can, over these platforms, and we have no ability to have a cooperative relationship.
Do you ask or do you order?
Well, if the law would change, yeah. I think there has to be a recognition that if we are too punitive, then you'll go to other technology companies outside the United States. And what we want to do is to control this. We also want to dominate this from a commercial side. So there's a lot of balanced interests. But the president leads in this regard. That's what we need. We need leadership, someone who has a backbone and sticks with things rather than just talks about them as though anything matters when you're talking about amendments that don't even actually are part of a bill that ever passed.
Governor, thank you.
When we come right back, closing statements. Stay with us.